The evening she announced over dinner that she wanted a prenup felt like the first honest thing she'd said in years. She set her fork down, eyes steady, and said, "We'll keep everything separate." I surprised her by agreeing without argument. Inside, a plan began to take shape. I signed the papers calmly. People around us whispered that I'd made a mistake, that love shouldn't have conditions. They didn't know what I already knew, that her demand was an opening, a crack in the armor of our marriage that I could use to learn the truth about her heart. For months I played the part of the compliant husband. I listened when she complained about work, praised the meals she cooked, and let her have the social life she wanted. Outwardly, nothing changed. Inwardly, I worked harder than ever, pouring my energies into projects she thought were hobby ventures. While she assumed my silence meant surrender, I was quietly building a life she could never touch. I made appointments, read contracts, and polished plans late into the night. The prenup was not a prison for me, it was a map. It showed me where to draw lines, and where she expected those lines to stay. As my ventures turned profitable, I kept the growth secret. I bought nothing ostentatious, paid no attention to gossip, and let her believe the man she married was the same one who'd always been a modest earner. Her curiosity grew, but she never probed in earnest. She had chosen separation. She would have to live with its consequences. One spring morning I began the next phase of my plan. I proposed we reset our lives, travel, meet old friends, reconnect. She accepted with eager relief, thinking the warmth returning to our home meant she had won me back. I let her enjoy the illusion while I set pieces in place. I began funneling money into causes she publicly admired, creating charities and endowments bearing names that sounded familiar and sincere. Invitations went out to gala events, and she attended, radiant, praising the causes that now carried her name in speech after speech. She basked in the public credit, never once wondering who put the funds behind the curtain. Then I arranged an anonymous donation large enough to fund a community center in the town where she grew up, the kind of legacy she always said she wanted. At the unveiling, organizers thanked a private benefactor, and a hush of admiration fell over the crowd. She smiled, eyes glistening, convinced fate had finally aligned with her ambitions. But privately, I took different pleasure. I began to redirect the couple's shared social network subtly, exposing small truths to those closest to her, glimpses of her impatience, hints of the way she calculated relationships like ledgers. I did it without malice. I presented reality in a way that let people see what I had seen. The real revenge was not to humiliate but to reveal. I wanted her to face the consequences of the wall she had placed between us. So I invited her, quietly, to sign a new arrangement, a public partnership for the foundation that required transparency and oversight. She agreed, thrilled at the prestige. When the foundation's board requested access to financial statements, the prenup's protections meant she could not claim any of the funds as ours. She'd separated personal ambition from marital partnership with her own hand. Now she discovered that prestige without stake felt hollow. The applause turned thin. At night she began to ask me questions she used to believe she already knew. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you want to share?" My answers were measured. "You asked for separation," I reminded her. "You asked for things to be separate. I respected that." The truth landed heavier than any accusation. Her friends watched the shift and commented in private. Some pitied her, some admired the cultural capital she'd amassed, but none could change the fact that she'd chosen walls over windows. She had access to honor and to applause, but not to the inner vault where decisions had been made. The final move was quiet and precise. I arranged for the house to be retitled in a way that reflected my separate holdings, made clear through legal channels and the prenup's terms. She would keep the life we'd built in surface, the dinners, the trips, the parties, but the power to alter its foundations rested elsewhere. When she confronted me, rage and hurt tangled in her voice. "You used my demand against me," she said. I met her without triumph. "You used a prenup to protect yourself," I replied. "I used it to keep my promises to myself." There was no gloating in my tone, only the quiet satisfaction of a lesson taught and learned. In the months that followed, she smiled in public and grew quieter at home. We continued to live under the same roof, attend the same events, and keep the same polite intimacy. But the dynamic had shifted. She had the spotlight, I had the freedom. Her demand for separation had given me both the means and the lesson to step away. Revenge, I discovered, need not destroy. It can be a mirror. My actions were not meant to wound for pleasure, but to reveal the truth she had chosen, that when you asked to keep everything separate, you might end up living with the separation you wanted. She had asked for lines. I simply followed them to their end.